In the uneasy waters of the South China Sea, where tension simmers like a storm waiting to break, an incident unfolded that has left military analysts, diplomats, and citizens across the world questioning just how close humanity is to a devastating conflict between two of the most powerful nations on Earth. The event began as an ordinary patrol flight, a routine mission assigned to a squadron of the United States Navy, operating under strict orders to maintain presence in international waters and airspace. Among the aircraft was the formidable A-18 Super Hornet, a jet designed to withstand some of the most hostile skies on the planet, a machine that has served as the backbone of American carrier-based air power for decades. What was meant to be a show of strength and reassurance to allies quickly spiraled into a moment of near catastrophe that could have ignited a war. The Super Hornet, sleek, deadly, and bristling with advanced avionics, was flying at cruising altitude under clear skies. Its mission was routine surveillance and maritime awareness. The pilot, a seasoned aviator with thousands of flight hours, maintained radio contact with his carrier strike group stationed not far from contested waters. Suddenly, radar operators on board the carrier detected an unusual electronic signature. A missile lock warning blared inside the cockpit of the Super Hornet. The pilot's training kicked in instantly, but what followed was nothing short of a chilling confrontation. Somewhere along the coastline of China's fortified islands, a surface-to-air missile battery had activated its radar, tracking the American jet as if preparing to fire. For years, tensions in the South China Sea had been escalating. China had built artificial islands, turned them into military outposts, and claimed vast swaths of territory that international law did not recognize as theirs. The United States, determined to assert freedom of navigation and challenge what it saw as unlawful expansion, regularly flew reconnaissance and patrol missions in these waters. Both sides understood the risk. A miscalculation, a sudden burst of aggression, could spiral into a nightmare scenario. This time, the nightmare almost became real. As the missile warning tone echoed inside the Super Hornet's cockpit, the pilot executed defensive maneuvers, banking sharply to the left, descending in altitude, and deploying electronic countermeasures. He did not know if an actual missile had been fired, but the radar lock was unmistakable. It was a hostile gesture, a signal that China was prepared to pull the trigger. Back on the American carrier, commanders were scrambling. Communications went out to Allied ships in the vicinity. Surveillance drones were redirected. Submarines shifted positions. Every sailor and officer understood what was at stake. If that missile had launched and destroyed the Super Hornet, the United States would have been forced to respond. Lives would be lost. The escalation could have drawn in not only regional powers like Japan, South Korea, and Australia, but also NATO allies around the globe. The world, unknowingly, was inches away from a spark that could have ignited the most dangerous conflict of the 21st century. The Chinese military, for its part, claimed later that the American jet had been flying too close to its so-called territorial airspace, though international maps and maritime law showed otherwise. Beijing insisted it was acting defensively, that it had merely issued a warning. Yet the Americans knew what their systems had detected. This was not a simple radio transmission telling a pilot to turn back. This was the unmistakable signature of a weapons system preparing to engage. Experts have noted that such a move is not carried out by accident. It requires authorization, a deliberate decision from officers who understand exactly what they are doing. That is why this moment has rattled strategists and policymakers across the globe. If one side was willing to go this far, what would stop the next step? The Super Hornet pilot, still in evasive maneuvers, never lost composure. He reported the lock-on to his carrier, continued his flight path with modifications, and waited for instructions. His training prepared him for such crises, but even the most experienced aviators know that no amount of simulation truly captures the terror of realizing you might be seconds away from being shot out of the sky. The radar warning eventually ceased, suggesting that either the Chinese battery disengaged its lock or that the American jet had moved out of range. But the message had been delivered. This was no longer just a contest of words and diplomatic protests. This was a demonstration of how quickly things could unravel. Military analysts quickly began dissecting the incident. Why did China escalate at that precise moment? Some argue it was a test, a way to probe the United States and gauge its reaction. Others believe it was a local commander acting aggressively, possibly exceeding his orders. Still, others insist it was part of a broader strategy, a carefully orchestrated move to show the world that China would not hesitate to push back. The United States, for its part, released a carefully worded statement. It condemned the action as reckless and dangerous, reaffirmed its commitment to freedom of navigation, and emphasized that its forces would not be intimidated. Behind closed doors, however, the mood was darker. Pentagon officials reportedly examined various scenarios, from diplomatic pressure to increased patrols, even the possibility of reinforcing carrier strike groups in the region. News of the incident leaked quickly, sending ripples through global media. Headlines declared the world was on the brink. Television anchors debated whether this was the closest the United States and China had come to direct conflict in decades. Stock markets wavered, sensitive as always to geopolitical shocks. Citizens thousands of miles away, in Europe and the Middle East, began to wonder what a clash between Washington and Beijing would mean for their own countries. The stakes were not merely regional. They were global. Two nuclear powers with vast militaries, advanced economies, and clashing ideologies had just come dangerously close to exchanging fire. What shocked the world most was not simply that the incident occurred, but how quickly it escalated and how narrowly disaster was avoided. Had the missile been launched, had the Super Hornet been destroyed, the United States would almost certainly have retaliated. Perhaps a Chinese installation in the disputed islands would have been struck. Perhaps naval skirmishes would have followed. And from there, escalation could have spiraled uncontrollably. The entire world, in retrospect, owes a measure of gratitude to restraint, or perhaps to sheer luck, that the worst did not happen on that day. Diplomats immediately scrambled to de-escalate. Back-channel communications were activated. Messages were exchanged between Washington and Beijing. Each side, in public, held firm to its narrative, but privately both knew how dangerous the situation had become. The world has seen near misses before. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, the tense standoff at Checkpoint Charlie in Berlin, the accidental alerts of the Cold War. Yet this incident reminded everyone that history has a way of repeating itself, that great powers can stumble into war not by grand design, but by sudden bursts of aggression and miscalculation. The Super Hornet returned safely. To its carrier, its pilot greeted as a hero not because he had fired a shot, but because he had survived a confrontation that could have